Hi, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and welcome to Legislative Update. With me today is State Senator Julian and State Rep Sarah Peake.
Hi, Teresa.
Great having you back. This is always so much fun.
Yes.
So, what has been happening? What's the most breaking news you've been working on?
So, a lot of less so breaking news, but a lot of sort of work to implement legislation that we passed at the end of the legislative session. Actually, recently, 2 days ago, Rep. Dylan Fernandez and I held a press conference and convened a whole host of stakeholders who work in the aquaculture and ocean sciences. When we look at climate change, and there's a whole myriad of challenges we're going to face. Yes, many of them are really big and existential, but some are quite specific, and one of those is ocean acidification. This is the changing of the pH of our oceans, which changes the amount of carbon dioxide in the water, which then impacts the ability for shellfish and also lobsters and other sea creatures who use calcium carbonate to build their shells. So this has actually been a big challenge that we've seen out in Washington State, and there was a pretty significant erosion of the aquaculture industry out in Washington State because of ocean acidification. And so what we did in the legislature, I sponsored a bill in the Senate that we got actually passed in this environmental bond bill to establish a commission to look at ocean acidification. And the House agreed to it, and so it's been passed into law. Now we're beginning to convene this group. It includes, scientists, some of the best marine researchers, which are right here in Woods Hole on Cape Cod, the aquaculture industry, also our lobster industry, the sea scallop industry that's largely out of New Bedford, and also recreational fishermen. Getting all these folks at the table with the State Division of Marine Fisheries, with other stakeholders and legislators, so we can try to get ahead of this. We are not seeing the level. We have thankfully not seen the level of acidification that Washington State has, but we know this is coming. And so this is an effort to get ahead of that, any safeguards we can put in place so that we're more prepared.
What happens? What happens to the
shells? Disintegrate.
They just literally
they
disintegrate?
Soften, and suddenly, there goes your entire oyster industry.
Or lobster.
Or lobster.
Yep.
Right.
Wow.
And the lobster fishery is still one of the most viable and valuable fisheries that we have. New Bedford is the #1 port for landing of scallops anywhere in the country. So, Massachusetts is at the epicenter of this, and there's so much of our economy. The direct jobs directly with the fishermen, but then the jobs that are secondary and tertiary to that. So this is critically important work that the senator has done, and Dylan Fernandez, has been his partner in this moving forward.
What will this actually do?
So this is getting a whole host of these stakeholders together, and we'll have 4 or 6 meetings over the next year, and we'll pull together a report around what the Commonwealth can do. And so that'll include likely some resources and appropriations, that may include some regulatory changes, and other recommendations that may even be adopted in the industry. So even in the hatcheries, right, where these where we're taking oysters and clams that are, microscopic and growing those, acidification has already become a challenge. So we're looking to have a whole host of recommendations, basically a roadmap around how the Commonwealth can get ahead of this. Again, just one of the myriad of challenges that we're having to, trying to get ahead of in a changing climate. I think on this one, there are things we can do tangibly that help get us ahead of this challenge, so we can safeguard these vital industries.
This is also kind of interesting, because one of the things that I think people aren't always aware of is you've passed legislation to make this happen, but now it actually has to happen.
Right, like I just got appointed to the Regional Transit Authority Task Force. Similarly, that was established during the budget process. Both the House and the Senate agreed to it, and the governor signed it into law. So it brings together stakeholders. I happen to be the speaker's appointee on it. Tom Kerr from the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority is one of the governor's appointees on it. There's about a dozen of us who are meeting every other week now to look at the regional transit authorities to understand what best practices are, with the end goal of coming up with a memorandum of understanding between the administration and the RTAs. So the RTAs, for people who don't know, like when you see one of the buses on Cape Cod, that's not run by the same people that run the T. That is run organically here by a board and by our executive director, Tom Kerr, of the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority. They have one of those in Brockton. They have one in Worcester. They have them out in the Berkshires, Pioneer Valley. Any region outside of the catch of the T, so anywhere outside of the commuter rail or where the T serves, those people, all of us, are served by the regional transit authorities. I've been involved in this for the better part of a decade. We're sort of the poor stepsister to the T. They get all the attention and focus. Right. So this is a way to bring attention to the RTAs, create a framework for best practices, yet not have all those RTAs report to some administrator in Boston. Because you know what?
Yeah.
The needs on Cape Cod or the needs on Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket for public transit are very different than what they are in Brockton or Worcester or the Pioneer Valley. So each of these RTAs really has to work as an autonomous sort of agency, yet there has to be appropriate oversight. So that's what we're working on in that area. And that too, as Julian was talking about the acidification task force, I thought, right, I'm sitting on one of these. Right. That is the result of work that we did in April, May, and June of this year.
So now we're moving into implementation season.
Yeah, right. We're giving seasons to everything. We had bond season, now we have implementation season. I like this. Season, but it's true. People think that you pass something and then, boop, it's done. Right. And
often if you don't watch the process, after you pass the law and you walk away from something and you don't watch it, it might not be implemented in the way you intended. So we actually ran into this recently in the budget process. I got basically it's a break on a surcharge for that employers have to pay for health insurance and for any of their employees who are on public assistance health insurance, publicly funded health insurance, and it's called the EMAC surcharge, employee mandated employer. EMAC, employer mandated medical assistance, and it's a contribution. And so the draft regulations were put out by the administration, and it really didn't jive with how I intended as the legislator who wrote the amendment and got it filed and got it passed. It didn't kind of come out how we intended. And so now, there's a whole series of letters and comment that Cape Codders and other businesses and nonprofits who are affected by this are sending to the administration. I'm weighing in, and a number of legislators are weighing in with a letter. And you have to watch it though, because if you don't watch that implementation, you may have passed the law, but it may not be rolling out as you intended.
Yeah. Another example of that. So the first destination casino has opened in Massachusetts in Springfield. When we took up the casino legislation, I think now it's 4 or 6 years ago, quite a while ago. Built into there were some protections for entertainment venues like the Cape Cod Melody Tent, like the North Shore Music Theater, the Hanover Theater in Worcester, so that all of the talent wasn't sucked out of these areas and ended up in the resort casino. So there is a certain percentage of the casino revenues that is to go to help support these local and regional theaters. Well, lo and behold, now that the casino is built, the doors are open, revenue is, all these years later, is finally starting to flow. We're having a little bit of an issue with the Baker administration because they aren't taking penny in, penny out, dollar in, dollar out, going to these theaters, but want to filter it not only through a grant process, but take some of that money for other purposes. So the chair of the Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development Committee, my co-chair of the Cultural Caucus, we are in the process of writing letters to the administration, trying to get language in a SUP budget to clarify exactly, when we wrote this, we meant this, we meant what we said, and do that again. And I've certainly heard from the owner of the Cape Cod Melody Tent about this, and it's a critically important thing. And I think all of us on the Cape know the value of these smaller theater venues like that, and we don't want to see that money get siphoned off.
Well, the other thing that this is a season for is research, right, and learning about things. And I know we were talking a little bit about some interesting observations you were able to have around the opioid issue.
Yes, that's right. I'm fortunate. I'm just a few days back from a legislative delegation. It was reps and senators who went to Portugal and to the Azores. And in addition to meeting with the U.S. ambassador and the Portuguese president, we met with this man who is in charge in the city of Lisbon of what's called the Dissuasion Commission. So a number of years ago, I think it's almost 5 years ago now, Portugal decriminalized opioids, all opioids, heroin, cocaine, all of it. So if you are found in, it's not legal, it's decriminalized. So it's not, oh yes, you can possess, use, and all of that. So if you're found in possession of certain amounts, and there's a threshold, so you understand when somebody's a dealer versus this is for your own personal use, you're written a citation, and there's a dollar penalty that you pay, a euro penalty. But in addition to that, instead of going through the court system, you must go and appear before what they call the dissuasion commission. And the idea is to dissuade you from continuing to use heroin in most cases. And that is done in a number of ways. There are referrals to counseling that are made. There's inpatient treatment and services that are provided. And unlike here, where we may have a 2-week limit on something, because they have single-payer universal health care, people get the treatment they need for as long a time as they need that treatment. And the other piece of the puzzle that they've done is they've really broadened how they look at treating addiction. And I think that there is little, probably no stigma attached to some of these replacement therapies like Suboxone or Methadone. In fact, he told us that there are mobile vans that go around the city of Lisbon, and you can count on your mobile Suboxone van being on this street corner at this hour every day. So you can go there, you don't have to go out of your way to go to a clinic and all that. You can go there to get your dosage, and every 2 weeks you must check back in with your physician or your clinician, and the dosage is determined. Of course, it's not just giving out the dosage. I mean, there's ongoing counseling that's required, but the idea is to get people working, important, contributing to society, being an active member of their family again, and all of those kinds of things. And the most shocking statistic, there's about 11.5 million people that live in Portugal. There's about 6.5 million people that live in Massachusetts. Last year, they had a little under 120 overdoses in Portugal.
Wow.
We had a little over 2,000 overdoses in Massachusetts.
There's something to look at here.
We're looking at, all of us were taking copious notes. The Senate chair of the Judiciary Committee was with us, my friend Will Brownsberger, our mutual friend Will Brownsberger. I saw him writing and writing. I said, Will, do I see a bill in there someplace? And, it's always good to learn from others. We couldn't just tomorrow apply it here. We have so many barriers to mental health and addiction services here. We need to focus on those. But to see something like this, and Portugal isn't the only EU country that's done this, and the other countries are seeing the same kind of success rate.
Well, that's a perfect lead-in, because we only have about 3 minutes left, amazingly enough. Might this be on the agenda coming up for the next session? What else is sort of sitting right around the corner that we might be looking at?
Housing. We never got a housing bill over the goal line. I know it's a priority of both of ours. It's a priority of Senate and House leadership, and I think it's a priority of the administration. So there'll be some sort of housing bill for sure.
I expect we'll see a health care bill as well.
Yes.
Both chambers took up a health care bill.
Right.
The negotiations fell apart at the end. There was a lot there in both bills, though, that are all common sense and that there's broad agreement on. Telemedicine, looking at actually what EMTs can do, which is particularly helpful for Outer Cape communities. Right. And then, this broader real look at, all right, how do we're spending more money on healthcare as individuals, as businesses, and as a government than practically anywhere else on earth. There's got to be a better way here. How do we meaningfully look at a single payer system? How do we meaningfully look at alternatives? I think there's a lot of appetite in both chambers to look at this seriously. In the Senate, we passed that study, which was my amendment.
I remember talking about that.
35-3 on a bipartisan vote.
Right.
And so that's going to be a big chunk of the session. And then there's all these smaller, more specific local bills that percolate up.
We're going to continue to work on Pilgrim. We did some great.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Great work this session. There's some bills that are sort of sitting in the dustbin now, but most importantly, we gave teeth to the Decommissioning Commission. They got a line item. They got a budget, $100,000 to be able to do work, because as we talk to colleagues in places like Vermont, that is going through the decommissioning process, but ahead of us in the pipeline, they said, hey, this is what you guys need to pay attention to. So we're learning from their mistakes, not that they were intentional mistakes, but we're learning from them to make sure that we really keep our thumb on this, and that doesn't spin out of control. We don't end up with a nuclear waste site for generations to come in Plymouth, and that during the decommissioning process and thereafter, all of us are protected, those of us who are downwinders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
and if you've got an issue or an idea out there, this is the time.
Yes.
Reach out to my office, to Sarah's office.
Absolutely.
Our staff have, both of our staffs are actually working on legislation now.
Right.
So really a pitch to viewers. This is a great time to reach out to us and work on something.
Absolutely.
Because we file bills like the third or fourth week in January. We'll file bills.
Perfect timing. And believe it or not, we are out of time.
I believe it.
So here we are in the season of making it all work, doing research and getting ready for what's coming up next, and reach out to these guys and tell them what you think. And we'll be back next month to see how all of these things are moving forward. Once again, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV, and with me is Senator Julian Sear and Representative Sarah Peake. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Teresa.